About 4 months ago, I was trying to transition my N8N agent swarm to Gemini Enterprise. And they had changed some backend stuff to where they now have sub agents. And so I was like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna, rebuild it in this platform. And for the life of me, I could not get it to function and communicate with the different sub agents. And I sat there for probably half a day trying to redo the prompts. And I'm just like, why is this not? And then yeah, it took me a minute, but then I said, why isn't this working? How does your logic work? Does the sub agents talk to the master agent? Is there a conscious stream? Who holds the conversation? And then it just broke it down for me. It was like, oh no, sub agents, they execute, they throw back the conversation, the output, basically, the master holds the entire set. So this whole system that you built doesn't work here. My kind of go-to saying is you should use AI to use AI. So if you don't know how to do something, you could just ask it how to do it. I've seen so many people sit in front of ChatGPT or Claude or something like that, and they're just like, oh, this is not working. It's not coming out the way I want it to come out. And simply put, you could just ask it, why are you not doing what I'm asking you to do? Why is this not working? Why is this format not formatting the way it is? Well, what's the limitation?
Most people in talent are still asking what the AI tool they should buy. My guest today went the other direction. He taught himself to build the AI inside one of the hardest environments to build it in, a regulated aerospace company where you can't just plug things in and hope. Bryan Hong started his career as a recruiter. He joined Astranis as the founding recruiter when it was around 100 people and helped scale the talent function past 450. He built the multi-agent system that recreates a senior recruiter. He built the architecture to actually ship AI past security and compliance. He's Anthropic certified, and he's spoken at Greenhouse and became an engineer at age 38. His whole philosophy comes down to one line: stop trying to learn how to build it yourself and learn how to use AI to build it for you. He's truly passionate about the work he does and definitely one of the most innovative individuals within the recruiting tech space that I've had a chance to talk to on this show. Really looking forward to this conversation. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That was probably one of the best introductions I think I've ever had in my life. So appreciate that.
Sounds good. So before the AI architecture, before Astranis, and before recruiting, what was the early version of Bryan like?
Yeah, I guess pretty kind of in a nutshell was I was pretty ambitious. I was very outgoing. I actually really wanted to be a banker because when I was young, you see all these movies, super rich. Obviously, I want to be rich. I was pretty vain when I was young. And so, yeah, I actually was a banker at one of the large, I think it was a US bank. By the age of 18, I was working, going to college at the same time, worked at a couple financial institutions, got an econ degree, and just by luck, I graduated in 2010, which is probably the absolute worst time, maybe outside of the Great Depression, to get a econ or try to pursue some sort of financial degree or financial career. So I actually went out to Korea. I did a master's program there and kind of was bouncing around different fintech startups. And when I came back, I think kind of similar to everyone else was when someone was like, hey, do you want to be a recruiter? And I was like, well, what do you do? And they were like, we sell jobs. And I was like, great. And I was like, well, how much do you make? And they were like, you can make this much. And I was like, that sounds pretty easy. So I think that's pretty much how I fell into it. But yeah, before I was pretty driven on finance because I was really good with numbers. That was my bread and butter. I was good at math, I was good at numbers, never got an A in literature or anything like that. So by default, I was, all right, maybe I just gotta do something numerically driven. But yeah, I'd say that's maybe in a nutshell what I was like in my earlier days.
Yeah, really cool. I didn't realize that, but I was a econ major myself. And so 2008, I think 2008, 2009 is when I started too. And it was funny because I think we started in a similar space in terms of staffing. And at that time, I just remember cutting day, right? Ultimately, where they just started cutting people because there was too many hired, and I luckily was able to stick around and made it through that. But yeah, rough time there. But I think it's those rough times that help build, the thick skin that we have now. So, and then also you lived in more countries than states that you visited, and you're into League of Legends and also Baccarat. Are you still grinding ranked in League, or has AI building taken over your free time now?
Yeah, I would say I sneak in a couple of games of ARAM, which are these very fast-paced version. So no longer the 60-minute games or 45-minute games, probably the 10, 15-minute game. But yeah, I would say most of my time these days is spent building AI solutions. I'm trying to build like a catalog for myself of different automations on a multitude of platforms. And hopefully within the next 30 to 60 days, I want to be able to release that to the public so that people can basically use it or reference it. Baccarat, I would say, is more of my partner's decision, depending on how long she lets me play. So yeah, I would say a little bit more limited. I also have a 3-year-old, and obviously she's definitely my world. I try to spend as much time with her as possible as well.
Really cool. Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks you in, right? When you have this opportunity to build and build and build, it sometimes can take you away from some of those other things and the hobbies that you like to get into. But there's a certain level of satisfaction from building stuff for me, and seems for you as well. And I also I was going to say, I was just thinking about this. Something I started doing recently, which I needed to do, is I built a library because I've been building so damn much that I forgot what I was building. So I finally put it in a library and was okay, we actually have some type of catalog to this. And a couple months from now, I don't build the same thing again.
I agree. With AI, I very often catch myself feeling like I'm out in a race against time, but the only person in the race is myself, which is a very weird concept, but I think it's also a really great driver of trying to figure out how to push your limits and automate X to Y. Like, what about X to, back to Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or something like that. There's like this consistent, I think, desire to want to continually push the limits. And I think that's something I feel very blessed to have.
Yeah. And so I was thinking about this too, your background, where you started in recruiting, and some people that go in recruiting and they start right out in-house recruiting. And then there's agency recruiters, where both you and I started. Yeah. And those are different paths, and there's different purposes, and there's different opinions and perspectives about each. But I think the cool part, again, a little bias here, but from that agency part, is it's a little gritty. It's more competitive. You're really going after these positions. You're learning a lot of skills that otherwise you probably wouldn't have learned as just an internal recruiter. It's a somewhat of a different skill set, but it's cool to see that you've started there and then transitioned into in-house recruiting, as well as you've been able to innovate some of these tools. So what I like to see is that you've been able to take the breadth of that knowledge and experience and apply it and build cool stuff. So to getting into that a little bit, so 2 years ago, you actually took that 6 months to go deep on AI and build that 6-agent system for your recruiting team. Walk us through that and tell us a little bit more about what that actually does.
Yeah, so I guess before I start, Astranis, we build satellites here in San Francisco, so we are a very heavily regulated company. And so trying to build anything here is a very big challenge, and that kind of then also applies to like hiring talent. So for example, we are ITAR regulated, which takes a good chunk of the Silicon Valley talent off the table right away because of eligibility. And then even when you are looking for this particular subset of very talent dense or talented people, we are a very talent dense company. And so they're really looking for that top 1%. And so now you're like, we're looking for the top 1% and the top 60% if you cater that just to Silicon Valley. And so every message, every minute you're researching, every hour you spend or half hour you spend calibrating with a hiring manager, all of that is compounding to be more and more precious in terms of time and ability to execute. And so I always found that to be a good recruiter, you need to obviously be able to generate interpersonal skills. You need to be able to be passionate about what you recruit for, which really means you need to know more than just the top 3 skills or the top 3 to have. You actually need to know what these people do. You need to be able to talk the way that they talk, and also understand the meaning behind what you're talking about. I think there's lots of recruiters who may hire for electrical engineers, and they cannot actually describe what a PCB looks like or a PCBA board. And I think you also need to be data driven, and you also need to be able to be influential. You need to be able to manage your relationships both left to right, up and down. You need to be able to advocate and wear different hats, whether you want to be an advisor, a consultant, so on. And then I would say the 5th one that's coming to fruition, which is you need to be pretty fluent with AI. And so to do all of these very quickly was tremendously difficult. And frankly speaking, the vast majority of the recruiters that we pull in Silicon Valley, these are like SaaS recruiters. So when you sit them down in front of a manufacturing or production manager or director, and they're just like, okay, we need a harness design engineer who's literally going to sit there and count the number of pins, make sure there's hundreds of cables running through, and da 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 da. They have no idea. And so it would take them on a natural scale, like a couple weeks to understand this. And a lot of that was educating themselves, understanding the market, being able to identify the right companies that are data driven in which we can hire from as quickly as possible, and then being able to truly craft a personable and from their own persona. How are these engineers viewed? If you know about certain types of roles, there are certain roles that, a good example is if you are at a very, very big software company that's a hot AI startup, you're not generally as well liked if you're in finance as you are if you're a software engineer. The value scales are a little different. And then you flip that over to the investment bank and it's, well, they don't really value software engineers that much. They value the bankers. And so you really have to be able to take that position of how do I really send a value prop to this individual as quickly as possible that's grounded in facts, that's scraped their Reddits around their company culture and what people are struggling with or what people are talking about inside. And so, yeah, I built this kind of agent swarm that essentially identifies these target areas and condenses that administrative work and research so that a recruiter, instead of spending maybe a couple of weeks or even a week to do this, they can have it done in 3 hours. Because really in the past, without AI, the compiling of this information was, I would say, 80% of the work. Then digesting it was probably 20%. And so I created this system where you have a master orchestrator, and basically all it does is delegate the tasks based on what you want. I have some pretty funky names, but I have my first sub-agent is called Sensei and basically just teaches you. So it takes these very crazy technical terms and breaks it down into non-technical, very everyday, referring to things as the kitchen or the house or the car. And then you have Atlas, which really maps the market. It ingests things like US Census Bureau, current events. It takes people that are already on your team, looking backwards at where they came from, what are kind of the cultural signals and what you aspired to be type of companies, and it kind of maps those out, aggregates it both geographically. And so I'd rather pivot to a different or like prioritize a different region. And then you have basically a job description generator. We give it a bunch of context. We have Hunter and Shakespeare, one that creates a sourcing strategy, one that actually generates the actual outreach, whether it's multiple emails, in-mails, LinkedIn connection requests, whatever you have. And then there was an actual interview plan generator that was based on our interview structure. And then you had an Oracle, which would bring in lots of white paper and analytics for recruiting. So you could help calibrate with hiring managers and say, hey, look, the market says it takes about 65 days to 90 days with an 80% or 60% offer acceptance. We trend at X. We're doing well. We're not doing well. And then finally, there's always a QA bot that basically just makes sure everybody's doing their job. But yeah, that was like my first real big AI build that I think, at this point, first iteration was like 18 months ago, and I built it through N8N. But yeah, it was a pretty big game changer. And I think it was a real blessing for the team because it not only got them engaged, but it then allowed them to start building their own solutions, which was, I think, the real value of AI. It's that extension of, in the past, you build these single point solution softwares that can do just X, but that's not AI. You can take X and you can make it Y, you can make it Z, you can make it D, you can make it E, whatever it is that you want. And so, yeah, it was a huge impact to the team and definitely allowed, especially those who are less data fluent, to really kind of harness that power almost instantaneously.
It's funny because I think a lot of times the public that doesn't have experience with recruiting, maybe somebody that's on the candidate side, it's funny to hear their feedback of how they think recruiters go about finding people and how limited it is. Where it's just, all you know is some keywords, that's it. It's pretty high level, it's pretty basic. But what you just described is far from that. And not that everybody out there is using that extensive of a stack, but that is very impressive, I can say, from somebody who's been in the industry for a while. I think definitely what you've done, the analytics, the market mapping, all those components, as well as training, giving the sell or the package that you can present to candidates as to why this particular offer is a good match, and to be able to actually discuss it on their terms. Those are things that most companies are definitely not doing yet, but ultimately they probably will at some point in the future. And you're just innovating in this space. But the cool part is that you get to be creative with that. So you created all these specific personas. you're able to look into how that process works. And you have that architect mindset, which I talk about a lot on the show, which I think is really a critical skill for the future. So just knowing that's something that you built, ultimately, obviously it's been a game changer for you. And I can remember from when we talked previously, you were telling me a little bit more about it. My takeaway from it again was kind of like, you're able to take somebody that's maybe level 1 recruiter and within a matter of time, a reasonable short period of time, level them up probably 2 or even 3 levels. And that previously would have just taken maybe just years of grinding it out and experience. And maybe they would have never even achieved that. But now they actually have the ability to do that based upon that system that you've built.
Yeah, it's definitely be able to just provide that framework, I think is, to your point, there's lots of things people don't think of, people do think of, but if you can think about, I don't know if you ever watch Harry Potter, but like, yeah, I forget what that guy's name is, but I think he's Dumbledore. And he has his wand and he can basically put his memories or thoughts into the pond.
Yeah.
And I think that's literally it. Recruiting is a science if you want it to be. And taking that algorithm and then building it into the AI, it does provide that capability extension for someone who is new to it to work on a same framework level and scientific level of some of the most senior.
Yeah, really cool. Now, you've said that people focus too much on what they want to build when they should be learning how to use AI to build better. Can you break that down for someone who feels they're behind?
Yeah, I think most people think that the limiting capacity of AI is the user. What do I know? How can I do this? And how do I need to tell this what to do? But really, I think it's actually the inverse of that. Like, kind of go-to saying is like, you should use AI to use AI. So like, if you don't know how to do something, you could just ask it how to do it. I've seen so many people sit in front of ChatGPT or Claude or something like that, and they're just like, this is not working. It's not coming out the way I want it to come out. And simply put, you could just ask it, why are you not doing what I'm asking you to do? Why is this not working? Why is this format not formatting the way it is? Well, what's the limitation? And it'll literally tell you. I remember one time I was doing it with a doc and it was like, oh, it's because I technically don't have the ability to edit a doc. I can only do PDFs. And at the time it was like ChatGPT 4 or something like that. And when you do some sort of HTML, or I forget what it was, but it was like, we can only use dashes. We don't have dots for the bullets. And I was just like, oh, okay. So I guess there's no point of trying. Because like, if that's the limitation, then it's never going to happen. But I think that's the idea, is really you got to be able to ask it to explain itself so that it can teach you and it can show you like what it can do and what it can't do. And to kind of your earlier quote of like, okay, becoming like an engineer at age 38. Yeah, I think that's simply put is because I used AI to use AI, which allowed it to teach me the things that I needed to know in order to be able to go and have an educated conversation with different stakeholders. But really, I actually just got a message from somebody like the other day. Hey, I did this other thing for a group called PropMates, which I really like as well. And this person that I have never met was, hey, I watched your video and you had mentioned you could just ask Claude to say, hey, what am I good at? What am I bad at? How should I use Claude, or how can I improve my usage, and what are my insights? A lot of people don't know that, but you could like do a / insights for Claude and it'll kind of roast you. It's just like, you suck at this, you're really good at this, and you need to stop doing this. But that's the crazy thing, is like, if you spend 40% of your day just talking to this thing, I mean, imagine how much data it's consuming about your habits, about your personality, about the things that you aren't doing well versus you are doing well. And I usually do that once a month. I just say, hey, how am I trending? What am I doing better? What am I doing worse at? Help me auto correct myself to become a better user of this technology. Because simply put, you have the entire world's knowledge base in this thing. And so you can imagine you're basically like, I don't know, the master of the universe. And you're asking yourself, oh, what am I supposed to do? Don't ask yourself, ask the thing that runs the universe. And so, yeah, I do think people need to stop being so self-reliant with AI and really just be like, I'm going to leverage this thing to help me do what I want to do, even though I don't know how to do it. I think that's the beauty of the technology, or at least in my opinion.
Yeah, your advice here is every month get a little therapy session, get some feedback from your favorite LLM. I didn't know about the / insights. No, but I think that's a super solid tip. But I definitely have had that same conversation before in the past, or sometimes it's picked up different things and has said, wait a minute, you kind of keep trending down this direction. Maybe you want to consider going in a different direction. And yeah, I ultimately just feel like having these conversations, it's not like you have to take everything verbatim, just like you wouldn't from a therapist. You don't have to take everything exactly
No,
how it is,
100%.
but ultimately you're just expanding your knowledge base and your thinking in such a new creative way. I vibe with what you're talking about. I have a team member sometimes it'll be, oh yeah, Claude says he can't do it. What did you say? Was that
Yeah.
was the end of the conversation? It doesn't end right. Don't ever give me that. I mean, ultimately, I know I'm not saying there aren't certain limitations, but you can always ask more and try to dive in a little bit deeper and try to get more clarification with everything that you can integrate with and the different tools. There's always a workaround. It really just comes down to how much effort you want to put into it. Does it make sense to make that type of investment? But the limitations are really there. There's minimal limitations in terms of what can be built. Again, it's just more of a constraint of time and interest.
It's a very hard habit to break. About 4 months ago, I was trying to transition my N8N agent swarm to Gemini Enterprise. And they had changed some back-end stuff to where they now have sub-agents. And so I was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to, rebuild it in this platform. And for the life of me, I could not get it to kind of function and communicate with the different sub-agents. And I sat there for probably half a day trying to redo the prompts. And I'm just like, why is this not? It took me a minute, but then I said, why isn't this working? How does your logic work? Does the sub-agents talk to the master agent? Is there a conscious stream? Who holds the conversation? And then it just broke it down for me. Oh no, sub-agents, they execute, they throw back the conversation, the output basically, the master holds the entire set. So this whole system that you built doesn't work here. And I was just like, oh God, just such like a duh moment. And so it's definitely a hard habit to break. Working with AI, I think, is a true mental shift because when you think about prompt engineering, people don't actually think in prompts. It's like most of the prompt happens before you actually talk. If you're just like, what you're trying to do is you want to figure out, like a good example is like, I don't know, I was using AI to bolt on a new TV to like my tripod TV stand in my room. And you're trying to do the prompt and I'm just like, is this right? Is this right? Because in my head, I'm just like, all right, I'm going to bolt this on. I want to know if these bolts are the right bolts. Is this the right place to put the spacer? You consciously think that, but like you don't talk like that. And so, yeah, it's really weird to have to switch modes to be, all right, prompt engineering mode. But it is, I think, a conscious effort for sure.
Yeah, I have a similar situation where you just want an answer and then this is not the right time to be going. I have to table this. I can see this is going to take a lot more interaction.
Yeah.
And again, that's just, it's that trade-off of time and effort. But again, it's cool to know that you can pretty much build most anything that you want to. It just has to make sense. So going back to the recruiting. So you came up doing real recruiting, mapping markets, knowing technical domains, cold. You once leveled up recruiters from making those 3 hires a quarter to 15. So what separates a level 1 recruiter from a level 4 recruiter these days?
I kind of already mentioned some of the pillars of what I think a really great recruiter needs to have. I think I kind of categorize this into like 2 different areas. There's a personality and then there's actual just skills. Personality, and I would say these are probably things that I really tried to base a lot of my hiring on, is I think you have to have a desire to be the best at what you do. I feel like that's probably very universal, but the people that I find to be the best recruiters are people that do believe it's like beyond just a job. Like, this is a trade, this is a skill. I want to master this like an art. And then I think there's also the aspect of learning appetite. You have to really be hungry to learn a lot because you're working so many roles, you're dealing with so many personalities, you're dealing with a lot of different team dynamics. You need to really be open to learning and having a very high bar for curiosity. And then I think the third is just like, you gotta have work ethic, man. And this may take us back to our agency days, but like, maybe you were thinking it, but maybe I could say the unpopular decision or unpopular opinion, which is like, us recruiting is a lot cushier than agency. I'll throw that out there, man. Like, it's 100,000 times easier. In my opinion, some orgs definitely run an agency. So I'm not going to say all, but when we hear about some of these numbers, and I don't know if you've ever been on the other side of that hiring fence for recruiters, you're just like, you had like 6 people in a year. That seems pretty wild. Maybe there are some jobs that are very much like that, and I won't discount that, but But there is a hustle aspect, I think, that I really, really love about agency. And hey, let's just shout out to all my agency recruiters. But it is a blend of both worlds because you have to have, I've done a lot of transitioning of agency recruiters to in-house. And there are a lot of aspects of agency recruiting that do not bode well for internal recruiting. Because at the end of the day, I think it's one of the sayings that I used to have is, if you take an agency recruiter and you bring them into house, a good sign of when they've converted, per se, to understanding in-house principles is when they stop saying you or they and they start saying we. And that's a really big thing, right? Like at agency, it's always like, well, what do you want? What are you guys looking for? And what do you, it's like, no. When you're in-house, it's we. You are in the same company. It's like,
Right.
we all work here. So it's not me, it's not you, it's not the hiring. It's like, what do we want? And so, yeah, I think those are the personality aspects. But I would say what I expect from a level 4 recruiter is deep functional knowledge and business acumen. I maybe because I come from a finance background and one of the hobbies I didn't really tell you, which I still don't do as much anymore because of the AI and having a daughter and all that, but is day trading. And one of the benefits of trading or being financially watching CNBC every morning is they talk about all the companies. They talk about who's doing layoffs, who's restructuring, who's might get acquired, who is switching CEOs, who's doing, and man, it is a recruiter's gold mine. Those are the opportunities. You have a big executive switch up, man. Their senior people are like 1 foot out the door, 1 foot in the door, 100%. And those are just like those, I guess, in terms of trading is like, that's what you call edge. How are you edging out amongst the other 50, 100 recruiters? They're doing the same grind, doing the same routine, and then really having that business acumen of like, I think as you get to larger companies, it's way more important where there's, well, how much money are we saving and da, da, da. But really, it's more just understanding these business dynamics because like a good example of this is like we are in the space industry and about a year ago, or roughly early this year, two of the biggest satellite companies merged together. And that means there is a duplicate set of people on each side of the fence. And there's only going to be one side that wins out. And it could be from either company. And they didn't tell anybody. So that means everybody is potentially saying, I need a backup plan. And being knowledgeable just about the industry beyond just, okay, I know what this person does and all of that. I think that's a pretty big secret. A lot of people think, oh, well, I'm just I don't know. I don't know about what's going on in the business and how. No, that's an excuse. You get to any high level position for any company, you don't get to say that. You don't get to say, oh, well, I'm the CFO. I don't know anything about organizational design. I don't know about human resources or culture. That's HR. You don't get to do that. If you want to be the master of your trade, you got to be the master of your trade. And being a professional, there are some prerequisites, in my opinion. It's not just recruiting. You are a recruiter by trade, but you are also a professional and a person with knowledge and the ability to know things. Simply put. So yeah, I think business acumen is huge. The other one that I would say, which I've noticed a lot, is top down. And what I mean by top down is most people focus on the bare necessities of what roles need. Skills, job title, this and that. And what most people don't understand is you could actually do the inverse of that. You can say, okay, well, what is my product? What is the application at hand? And then what are other products that have a very similar application? If you look at satellites, one thing you might notice is like we do like lots of different environmental testing, vibration testing. And you probably wouldn't know, and especially in the past with AI, you definitely wouldn't know unless you asked. There are certain vibe testing protocols for consumer goods like a phone that are just not applicable. But you also might not know that wind turbines are pretty applicable. And like in terms of vibe testing. And so with AI, you can have that in an instant now. Back in the day, you got to do a lot of Googling, man. So I think functional deep expertise, business acumen, and diving in and really, again, just kind of learning. And then kind of backbone to all of that is for sure, you got to be in the data. You got to be able to build relationships. You got to be able to influence, switch your hats. So really, I think it's more controlling the domain of hiring, I think is what I look at as a level 4 recruiter versus just like filling the role. Getting the talent, bringing it to the table, that's level 1. Controlling the domain, understanding the path to growth, understanding the dynamics of the team, understanding the palette of your hiring manager, of your company, of your culture, looking at the external forces, the industries, business acumen, what's happening in the financial world, really looking at the tangent kind of connections at the top-down level for the product, the application of the technologies. That's level 4 for me.
For the audience less aware of recruiting, let's just imagine, even in your company or a similar company, let's say your company only has a couple of recruiters. That recruiter might spend a year recruiting on a position if they don't know what complementary skills are out there, if they don't know what the market bears, if they don't know what a reasonable cost is. They might just have a hiring manager that's coming to them telling them, hey, this is what we're looking for. But if you don't really understand what the market looks like and what the talent looks like and how to attract them and retain them, get them interested, get them excited, get them through a strong interview process, then you're likely wasting everybody's time. Not only time from not having that person in productivity, but also the time it's taking to find them and also missing out on the other positions lost along the way. And I've been thinking about this, Bryan. Even on LinkedIn, I see a lot of times, like especially with smaller companies, you see these like CEOs are saying like, it's all about who you hire. That's the number one. We're going to go through 15 rounds of interviews. Like they're so dead set on hiring. And I just wonder, are they aware of the other side of that hiring, which is they've got to have great recruiters? Because ultimately, if you don't have a strong recruiter, because you're a big, beautiful company, your brand is only enough to attract people's attention a lot of times these days.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a cool company. But if you're not remaining competitive in all those other spaces that you mentioned, like as far as like that sub-agent tool that you built, if you're not filling in the blanks in all those other areas, once you get that candidate to the interview, past that point, you're just kind of coin flipping versus that, yes, this person does exactly align to our environment. You have been able to speak to them about the culture. They understand the why behind it. Being able to connect those dots and understand that is, I agree, what a level 4 recruiter is like. And they're rare. People with those levels or recruiters with that level of skills are rare, maybe just because they haven't had that experience or haven't gone through that. And so maybe, again, the industry is kind of ripe for disruption there, but I like the idea of that tool you built. Maybe you'll be pumping out a lot more level 4 recruiters that can really add value to the company.
Yeah, I mean, let me just preface, this is how I know to do recruiting. So I definitely don't think it's the only way. I've met really great recruiters who for the life of them probably couldn't tell you what's on a spreadsheet, but they're really good. And they have taken this completely alternative route of building an amazing network and being just so personable and having their own version of an edge. So I want to throw that out there. This is not the way. This is just what I know. But I've definitely seen variations of this in all forms. So I wouldn't say there's one archetype. I think this is, in my opinion, and in my experience, the most holistic archetype, if that makes sense.
One example I love to use, one of my best recruiting partners of all time, it was painful for me to hear her on the phone. Like I would cringe by the things that she was saying. I just couldn't believe it. But she by far was the best. Ultimately connected with people, gave them the right message. I would say, are you sure you want to phrase it that way? She did have a lot of those qualities that, again, maybe your delivery isn't exactly correct, but you've got that secret sauce there, which is key. Yeah, Bryan, I think this is a really cool story too. You're a regulated aerospace company and you just couldn't hook up that 6-agent system. You spent months whitelisting it, the architecture, to getting it past enterprise security. And that's just something that a lot of folks don't do. Maybe they build something cool and then it stops there because the company isn't interested in getting it integrated. So can you tell us a little bit more about that journey that you went down?
Yeah. So I started building a lot of solutions. It was very clear that none of these would pass security protocol. They were just like, oh, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do this. And so I tried all different avenues. I tried different solutions, recommending different solutions. I think I demoed 80 plus AI softwares in less than a year. And then finally, Google has a platform that we can use for agents. It should be a no-brainer, right? That should go through security. So I actually approached Google because I saw their conference 2 years ago and got on the phone with these people. And I was just like, hey, I really want to get this platform. I want to pilot it. And it was so early that they were just like, we are kind of being very selective. What do you have in mind? And I just started rattling a bunch of stuff off. And it was very clear that the salespeople were like, okay, we got to go get a sales engineer because this guy's talking about random things. At the time, MCP was very new. And I kept saying, we want MCP for this, we want MCP for that. And so ultimately, I got this aboard. Big shout out to my boss, super big. He was one of the premier data HR leaders, kind of coming from all the cool companies or cooler than mine. Mine aren't very cool outside of Astranis. And so he was like, hey, I believe in you. I'll support you. And so I ultimately negotiated this crazy pilot where Google basically paid for it. They were like, we will like help you build it. We'll help you build a prototype and then we'll hand it off to you. And they were funding it, which is even better. And so I did that. And then me and my team just kept prototyping in this isolated cloud, but it was very difficult because we didn't have the integrations to our internal system. It was like, yes, we had this stuff and we were testing this in a very safe environment, but obviously not fully embedded in our VPC type scenario. And fortunately, I had really, really great partners. And I say that in full earnest on the software side. I had a bunch of kind of, I don't know if I would call them like sponsors, but just people who were like, hey man, you're doing some really cool stuff. If you need help, come to us and talk to us. And I just kept talking to them. And it was very clear after a while that it didn't really matter how much I was talking to them and pitching value. It was like there was a clear distinction of what I knew or what I didn't know and what they do. And I would say about 1.5 years in, we were still producing AI solutions through a platform called Google Workspace Studios, formerly known as Flows. And that was a real basic end-to-end inside the Google Workspace. We were able to do a lot of cool stuff with that, formatting and standardizing recruiter screens from Gemini and doing tracking from like emails to like sheets and whatever. There was a certain point where I kind of went to my boss and I just said, if we don't get to production, as in we don't have this fully software production scale, we're going to be waiting months until we start seeing any real value of things. And eventually that'll just cap out at a certain point. And that's mainly a tooling limitation. Honestly, I was like pretty frustrated. Not at like my team or anything, but just wasn't happening. And I think most recruiters or professionals will probably feel this pain. You build something amazing and you're just like, this will literally do 10% of my job and help me do more important things. And they're just saying no.
Right.
And so I was like, you know what? Fine. You say, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Well, it's not that easy. There's a lot more facts. And I just said, fine. So I pivoted my focus. I just said, okay, I'm just going to learn it. I'm just going to learn everything about it. And I'm going to just try to see if I can talk to them. This is a crazy thing to say. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm just going to try to learn everything that they know and make a real proposal. And
yeah,
so
that's called not taking no for an answer, Bryan, by the way.
Yeah. And so, and mind you, I've had help from one of my mentors here. He's one of the software engineering managers. So he helped me a lot. One of our infrastructure kind of AI guys, he was telling me a lot of good feedback. And then even our director of enterprise software was like a really amazing sponsor. And really a lot of times he made me go pound the sand. But I will tell you, I'm very appreciative because what he said he was doing was what he actually did was he said, I want you guys to have more rigor. I don't want you to just make these floppy prototypes that can break or are unsafe. And he made me go through the hoops. So in one sense, I was going through all the software normal deployment process. I had to submit architecture review. I had to go talk about it. I had to go prove my use case. I had to say, this is why we should have it. And then I had to propose different architecture patterns and I had to debate it with the software engineers. And then on the flip side, I really just wanted to get something deployed at a faster level. And I think most software teams and other organizations are all dealing with this. It's like AI can bring so much value, but how do you safely audit it? How do you deploy it at speed that matches the production? And I don't think anyone's cracked that nut. And so I went to just basically our company like RAG, and I just point blank said, I want you to go through all of our technical documentation. I want you to talk and describe every single system that is currently active that software engineers use. I want you to tell me why it exists, what it does, and how it fits in to the overall architecture of everything else that we're doing and any of the activities that we do and blah, blah. It pumped out hundreds of pages. And then I just started chipping at it one by one, just chipping away like, okay, well, what's this? What's this? And obviously most of it, I wouldn't say most of it, but a lot of it was not relevant. It was just like, we have certain systems that do certain things that have nothing to do with what I'm trying to do. And so ultimately it kind of boiled down to roughly 50 pages or something like that. And then I went to a Google AI conference and it was in the middle of me really studying this kind of stuff. And Google released a bunch of CLI tools and this new DevOps. And because when I went there, I have like 2 other team members. I have a data scientist that works under, and then basically a forward deployed engineer who's a customer facing, which is the other G&A teams. Okay, how am I going to build AI agents? Okay, hey, we made these cool agents and these agentic workflows. The sessions that they went to were that. my sessions were like sovereign AI and infrastructure management and governance and DevOps for AI agents and validation and testing and quality control. I just went to those sessions and they had some really cool features that came out. And in my head, I was like, this might solve some of the problems we have. And so I came back and I think I was heads down for about a month. And I took all the information that I got from the conference. I took all of our stack and I just kept working piece by piece. And I was like, does this work? Does this make sense? Does this compromise security? Does this, and whatever. And in the middle of a lot of that, I was talking with my partners on the software side. And the moment I actually put it all together, and I think I sat down and I put it in front of a few people, because I obviously pressure tested it in front of a couple of my engineering buddies before I took it to my VP of software. And it was a very different conversation. It was no longer a conversation of, well, it's a little bit. I was like, here's what I want to do. It's X, Y, Z. Here's what I think, and da da da. And they were just like, yeah, that makes sense. And it was just a very different vibe. And I sent it over to my VP. Oddly enough, they were just like, please, no more presentations. Because I tried so many times. But I think my VP of software, he looked at the presentation on the way to the airport for 20 minutes and he slacked me and he was like, I'm good with this. And I was just,
Nice.
my brain broke, dude. And again, I don't want to downplay how much effort it took. And there was frustrations, there were wins, there were losses, it was joy, sadness, all wrapped in one. But yeah, I just really wanted to do it. And so yeah, I think at this point, we're 1 week away from basically deploying our own, potentially own or private cluster and being able to start using this, what I call the AI highway, which is a repeatable, iterable deployment model. And we have 80 use cases lined up. And at the previous timeline, that would have took a really long time. And we think we might be able to do it in 180 days. So yeah, I was just definitely talking with lots of different people. Again, really big shout out to my software partners, stakeholders, VP of cyber, VP of software, and then my boss, and honestly, our executive team who really does believe like AI is a true mandate. They want to be innovative. They want to know that it's not a choice. It's a necessity to succeed. And so they've really been able to sponsor me and empower me to come to where, or like be able to achieve what I've achieved. And so just really appreciative. I don't think every company has a team that backs them that. So I definitely understand how grateful I should be. And especially my boss who gives me like this really big leash to go down these rabbit holes that fortunately for the most part have paid off. A lot of them probably shouldn't have in a normal case scenario. So yeah, that's the story. And yeah, that eventually converted me over to the technical track. And so yeah, to your point, age 38 engineer.
You learn so much throughout the course of that journey, and it's making those mistakes and learning things. And that, I think you grow stronger than just a traditional path of you learned it in college and then hopped in the seat. You actually went back and forth and had to bang your head against the wall and deal with internal politics, and having that level of sponsorship is incredibly unique. And kudos to your company as well too for making that level of investment and supporting that type of effort, because ultimately there is going to be a huge payoff for them, I think, down the road, and the quality of talent that they're going to be able to identify, and as well as up leveling those recruiters. So it's a holistic win. It was a gamble. Maybe they have to play a little baccarat too, but
bad odds. Not bad odds.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm comparatively thinking about not exactly what you've done, but just even sometimes it's hard to get a bag of chips approved internally. And so you were able to make something pretty grand happen there, Bryan. And like the way I think about it to the audience ultimately is just like, it could maybe not be as extreme as what you did, but not taking no for an answer, being able to provide value, explaining where things will be headed if you are to achieve this goal, and showing that interest and continuing to find the right partners internally and sponsor. Those are all key characteristics. You navigated that in an awesome way. And so I think that's a great story to share. So with that, Bryan, through that journey that you went through, and just like where we're at with AI, when you hear hiring managers these days ask for AI skills, what does that actually mean to you? And it could vary by different roles, but how do you go about evaluating whether or not the talent that you're looking for actually has the skills needed to be successful within your company?
Yeah, it's a bit of a hard question to ask. Or like, I think there's a lot of different dimensions, right? I would say what's not good or not a good signal for me is just like AI fluency. If you're just like, I know how to use Claude, I have a couple of skills. I think that's worse than you saying you don't. And let me explain that. If you do know how to use Claude and you have the ability to comprehend what skills are, and you say, well, I'm just using it every now and then. That to me is like having a tractor next to a shovel and you use a tractor twice a year. It's mind blowing. If you are fluent to a certain degree, you would dive in further. And that maybe is like that curiosity bar for me. And so that's a little telling. I think the second thing is if they are building things, not even, I mean, that doesn't mean you have to be building all the time. I don't want to misstate that. It just means, are you just kind of taking what is given and then like just saying, oh, maybe it does work, maybe it doesn't work. And it helps out sometimes. Versus like, I have talked to a lot of people who actually build things. And I think it is the process or the logic is what really intrigues me in terms of how they're building. So I think a better question, a lot of people say, have you built a Claude skill? And someone will say yes. And they'll say, I build it to like evaluate resumes or write an email that I have to write every now and then. Great. I think a better question to gauge it is, how do you know when to build a skill? Why'd you build that skill versus another skill? For me, that's way more important. It's like, are you thinking, okay, well, what is a skill? A skill should be recognized as something that you take some sort of median bar of the average times you'd execute this and say, this is qualifies enough to be a skill. If you do something once a year, do you need a skill for it? No. If you do something twice a week, twice a day, twice an hour, that bar changes. But the thought of the person thinking about it, that is really, really, for me, like a light goes on in my head. This person is thinking about not just what to do or how to do something, not just what it does, but why are you doing it? And I think that's one thing. So I really look at, okay, well, when you build a skill, are you thinking, does this qualify to be a skill? What qualifies to be a skill? What are the gates? Like, is it has to be a certain amount of time, has to be this much time draw from me, has to be this deterministic, has to be this successful in terms of a quality output. For me, I think those are like pretty bare bones. And then there's the idea of, okay, how do you actually build it? Is it a markdown? Is it a markdown plus 5 reference files? What's too many? What's too little? What is something that becomes a skill to an agent? What is the right amount of context? How are you engineering the context? How are you optimizing the markdown for the platform? I always look for people who look at the science of what it is. And engineers do this all the time. They always like look at do the simple thing first and and they do first principles and all that. Don't get it wrong. This is a science. It is math. This is like, that's what the model is, right? It's math. And so if you're just doing this by gut feeling, you're not going to get very good at it unless you are, I don't know, I think his name's like recruitment, who's the guy who wrote The Art of Vibe Coding or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that guy is really good, does no math, but I'm pretty sure that guy's an engineer too. But my point is like, yeah, I think when you're thinking about skills, it's not enough to just say you're using it. You have to first, I think first phase is, how do you make it personal to you? And do you understand how to do that in a methodical, logical, scientific way, or even just a process-driven way? And then the second thing is, do you look at that at a larger peripheral, what you were talking about earlier around range? You have the skill. Well, what else can it be used for? If you change it a little bit, what does a recruiting summary, recruiting screen summarizer do? Well, it just reorganizes context and can enrich it. Couldn't that be the same for a sales research report? Couldn't that be the same for, I don't know, a proposal? Couldn't that be, or like from raw data? Couldn't that, I mean, there's just lots of things. And so like, I would want this person to have that lateral vision. And then also, I think the people who are really good, they leave these kind of secret spots in, I do this a lot where I'll build some sort of prompt or like an agent or whatever. And when you start it, I build it with an initiation. So just be like, I have a framework that I share online, and like with at this point, I'm just sharing it with a lot of my buddies, but it is public. But like I made it so that when you drop it and copy and paste it in, you tell GitHub to clone it or whatever. I made it so that it says, hey, what do you do? What do you do for work? Okay. What are you trying to use this for? What do you typically do every day? And so it solicits the right information so that it can then kind of customize itself to the use case. But I think people who do that are pretty cool too. I think it's not a one size fits all. AI is a pretty personal in my opinion, unless it's very deterministic. If it's just like take X to Y, that's different. But like if I think for the more strategic things, it can be definitely pretty customizable. So yeah, someone who can really take what they learn, compound it, accelerate it, grow it. I think these are some of the things I look for. I don't know if that's a straight answer or not.
Yeah, so you're not letting them get away with use Claude. You're gonna dig a little bit deeper than that, go a little bit more in the weeds and in depth. And yeah, I mean, similar to you asking those questions, to me, it's a same type of methodology behind just even recruiting. There's a lot of times it's the question of why. Do you understand the logic? Why are you doing it that way? Why would you do it this way? Why would you do it this way instead of this way? At a minimum, what I'd like to see is somebody that does have that critical thinking capability,
Yeah.
can identify when something's going off the rails, when hallucinations are happening, when they're not just taking the answer for the reality of it, and they're trying to figure out, is it really correct? And like, it's just a lot of times when you're just ingesting so much information, you have to remember, it's a weird knack, but I can remember walking around and I would just remember bits and pieces of information about so many different people, probably things I could like, they have like AI glasses now, or that setup where you can, you can take your meta glasses or your different AI glasses and you can identify people. I am like that. Maybe recruiting does that to you to some degree, but you start kind of like remembering specific details, where so-and-so went to college. Oh, I remember this. I remember details. So remembering those details, being able to follow through on the details, understanding what's going on, again, critical thinking, connecting the dots. Those are valuable skills in this age of AI. What you're doing, maybe I'll get there one day to some of that, but a lot of it is still, the fact remains the same. What's your goal? How do you plan on getting there? What are the steps you're taking? What's your logic behind it? All that applies.
Yeah, I mean, and I should say, this perspective may seem a little extreme, but maybe a year ago, probably, I don't know, you tell me, isn't being able to use AI pretty much a job requirement now? It's not a luxury.
Yeah.
So in that sense,
Yeah.
you can't, anything else you do in your job, you don't just say, well, ATS, I could dabble a little bit. I know where like most things go. I upload most of my candidate. It's kind of a requirement now. So in that sense, you can't just say I'm kind of using it. It seems now that, to your point, if a hiring manager asks for someone who has AI skills, that sounds like a requirement. And last I checked, you can't be, hey, like bare minimums on a requirement and get a job. But maybe I'm living a little bit too much in the future.
Well, we're saying with this little bit of humor, but obviously different environments require different levels of knowledge and experience. And you're oftentimes working on some very technical roles ultimately. But at a base level, I think the initial analogy that you made, which is similar to this, which is you have a horse and a car. And if you're asking the person, which one are you driving all the time? And they're just talking about the horse. Well, guess what? They're not going to be able to get as much mileage. They're not going to be able to go as far. They're not going to be able to do as much. It might be something you're more comfortable with. Maybe you love Tombstone and you just feel like you want to be out on the open range, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to drive across the country on that thing. And I think that's what hiring managers and generally companies are seeking and want, is that people that are using the right tools to level up. And if you're standing next to somebody that you've got two people and one is still driving in a horse and buggy and the other one's driving in a car, I don't think that's much of a decision to make anymore. Is there anything else that you wanted to say today that we didn't have a chance to get into?
Yes, there are just a few things. One is I will give a shout out to Jeremy Lyon because he's the one who referred me for this. And I know he's doing really cool stuff in the UK and he is really good. I had really good talk with him and what I love about talking with other AI people who are really good is you generally are like pretty good at like very different things. And he has like lots of exposure in things I wasn't good at. And so I was like, dude, can you send me some resources? But I think he just started his own startup. So if you're in the UK, you should check him out. Obviously, thank you as well, Jeff. Maybe the other thing that I'll just say is like, I think one thing people should really bear in mind, especially even in the context of this conversation, is 80% is 100%, which means I think at the level that we are at now, unless it's a very simple automation, which in that case, for the most part, you don't even need AI. But a lot of people think AI is less, you one-shot it, you walk away. That's a myth. It is such a myth. A lot of great use cases, it basically does 80% of the work, and it takes days or a week or even weeks off your calendar, and you take one day to wrap it up. And that is, in my opinion, like one of the beauties of AI. Kind of back to your point, Jeff, of like, hey, make sure you look at it and you verify that this is right, which is sometimes a really big burden because you could produce a lot with AI and you're just like, I don't want to read all of this. So then you start thinking of ways to make it smaller. And then also, I think people should honestly think that AI is not replacing people. I remember in that OpenClaw hype, there was somebody I think who created the LinkedIn for like just agents. They were just like agents talking to other agents. I think someone was, oh, it's just like the age of just agents now. It's like, as far as I know, or as far as I'm aware, every agent that exists, there's a human behind it right now. There's some human directing it or prompting it. And so, yes, there still needs to be somebody doing the work, directing this technology, this amazing technology. And even beyond that, I think for the people who are maybe afraid of, oh, this is going to replace a bunch of things, I don't think so. I think it's actually going to lift the skill bar higher. I do believe, do I need to respond to regular emails or these maybe administrative tasks that are very, very repetitive? No, but then what do you do with the rest of the time? It's not, we just don't need this anymore. It's, okay, well, let's take these people who used to do that and make them do better things or more strategic things or things that impact the business at a higher level if we didn't have to focus this much energy on this single task. And so I do feel, one, that's kind of a reason why we should probably explore AI. But I also think is something that can change people and provide new avenues of opportunity. Maybe I'm a good example of that. But yeah, I just want to make it clear. I am definitely on the side of this is a accelerator of what we can do and less so much a replacement of that. Yeah, I thought that would be worth sharing because I feel a lot of people think that way around people who maybe just want to use AI for everything.
I started this in a big part because I wanted to try to answer that question for myself too. What does the future of work look like? And I brought on a number of different guests now. And I think the consensus is very similar, Bryan, where, yeah, we're talking about enhancing people's tools and hopefully getting into a position where people can focus on doing things that they actually can provide more value to. Bryan, where can people follow your work and stay connected with what you're building?
Yes, I'm trying to be more active on LinkedIn. I'm really bad at sharing my stuff, but I have been thinking about it. And I've been talking to one of my other friends, pretty deeply networked in the talent space. And so I've taken my journey and like created a curriculum around it. It was really like how I stepped up in every single stage of my usage of AI and trying to compact my 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. hair pulling sessions across weeks and just condensing that into a single learning lesson. And I'm still kind of debating whether I want to just release it. But like I have my GitHub is One Prompt Man. If you watch anime, there's One Punch Man, and I'm a big fan. So, but yeah, like the GitHub, my GitHub org is called One Prompt Man, and I actually share a lot of free stuff there. So I can definitely, if you want to look at it, recently I released the prompts for the 6 agents that you're talking about. So I released those prompts so people can use it and they can do what they will with it. I have a bunch of like N8N automations around onboarding, application tracking, and a few other things that I'll be releasing. Pretty cool. And I do it for a wide variety of platforms. So I'll do it for like Claude Code, Gemini Enterprise, N8N. So kind of a varied flavors, and there are like prompt differences. And then I'll also just release a bunch of random skills and probably free courses or just random lessons I think are people might benefit from. So yeah, probably coming soon. Otherwise, just hit me up on LinkedIn. You know, I'm always open to sharing.
Bryan, great conversation. Everything we got into today, from building AI tools to the idea that you're not stuck in the job you started, is in the show notes. And thanks for being here and helping our audience stay unlocked, and don't be a stranger.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.